Hello and welcome to DM&D here on the Tumble Tankard YouTube channel and Discord servers. I'm Argent Wind, your host, and we're talking today about endings. Goodbye, cruel world. As some of you may know, some of you may not. Avress has officially ended. We are having one more episode for our epilogue and to do some sort of quick Q&As where players and whoever else happens to be around can ask whatever questions they want over whatever happened in the campaign. And so, with that fresh in my mind, I started thinking about today's episode for here and talking about how to end campaigns. And we've mentioned this in the past. There was an episode we talked about moving on, where sometimes a campaign has an end for various reasons, and just things to keep in mind. But this is more of an intentional thing. This was a 3-year campaign that I had a beginning, middle, and end planned out. This was a culmination of the story, and so in this situation here, you're really planning for like how you're going to end it. And Obviously the story is wrapping up and characters get to do whatever they want. You have your epilogue, you have your wrap up and everything else like that. But today we're going to talk about what do you do after? You've been working on this. I mean, for me, I've been running Avress pretty much every weekend for 3 years. We had 126 sessions roughly. You have 119 on, or this will be 119 on Saturday, and we had seven sessions we played before we started streaming, and a couple episodes here and there that we missed out on. So, like close to 130 sessions of gameplay. And so that's a lot of time to put into a story that built up and grew. Um, so like all that effort, all that time and that, what do you do now? Well, first, take a deep breath, uh, and then reflect. The best thing you can do about when a campaign ends is reflect. And what do I mean? Take a look at what went well. Like look over what you did, think back to the stories, think back to the plots, think back to the characters, um, and focus on what went well. And don't focus on the negative. Start off with in your mind here, what did we have fun with? What did we enjoy? What went just about how I planned it? What were the crazy things I had to improv that worked really well? And focus on all that positive stuff first. And just kind of keep in mind here, um, the amount of effort a DM has to put into running games is quite a lot. Even if you're improving a lot of it, there's still a lot of mental energy. There's still a lot of prep. There's still a lot of uh, um, thought that has to go into what's going to go on. And so focus on things like what was the pacing like? Were there parts of the campaign that were pacing really, really well? And then, of course, at that point, think about, okay, well, if the pacing didn't go well, what was the stumbling block? What could have gone better? Was the power level okay? Did the players get too powerful and it was hard to challenge them without throwing everything else at them? Were they having fun with it? That's the main thing. Because even in a situation where you're not life and death, everyone's going to get wiped out, put TPK threatening every week there, the players can still have fun. That's the most important thing. If they're enjoying themselves, if they're feeling the pressure and doing what they can to get through an encounter there, then you've done your job well. Um, how did the story go? How did the plot unfold? Were you able to keep things going, or did it get derailed too much? And were you able to bring it back on track? All these things that went on during the campaign, reflect and focus on those, and kind of get those ideas in your mind of how did I do? Be objective, be honest, but also remember you accomplished something. I mean, you accomplished a game with people that sometimes it's like herding cats. It's really hard to keep them going where you're going here, but you get through, you had an ending and a campaign got to end. Um, so again, focus on that. And then start to think about what might you have done different? Because there's we can always make improvements. We can always have something go a little bit differently. Um, and there's things that you can look at, okay, based on all this information here, what would I have done differently? And then most important, once you've done all that, take notes. Um, talk to yourself, discuss it with some friends, maybe discuss it with the players themselves. Find out from them any feedback that you have. But then take all this information and use it. Now, if you're like me, you're going to run more games. You're going to run other campaigns. If you're like Nan's here, you're going to run 5 games at one time. Um, but understand that you're going to run something else next. So the best thing you can do is learn from what you've done so far and bring that into your next version, your next campaign. Now, the campaign, if you're running in a campaign setting, if you're running in a published setting, you might run that published setting again. If you created a campaign like a coherent set of story that you want to run again with a different group of players, then keep that. If you have all your notes laid out there and you're ready to do it over again here, you can repeat the same campaign. You can take parts of your campaign and run it maybe as a mini campaign, or take some part of it and focus on that and build out around that element of the campaign. I was thinking about this with Avress, and I'm gonna and I mean, just to give a quick rundown, I'm not going to spend much time on this because this isn't the place for that exactly. But Avress it was a 3 act story. First act, basically players learning the area, dealing with local issues, kind of helping a town build up into a city, um, and then dealing with a plot by a nasty cult that had ties to the party, and putting down that cult and defeating preventing them from doing something that could have been really bad for the world. End of Act One. Act two, we diverged from that and went off into Drakal and did a whole separate arc there about a big world-ending potential nasty creature there that was mind controlling people and doing all sorts of terrible things and getting more powerful. And so they had to put down that threat in Drakal. And then Act Three, related to Act One, coming back around to the big bad who was involved there, being able to go there and deal with the ultimate threat that was going to be even worse than the first Act One. So again, building up in power, building up in story here. But I was realizing today I could make an entire campaign and have a lot of fun with just Act Two, just the Dracol arc, and make it all take place in that area there with various red herrings and plots and things like that, and letting it build up slowly until the party gets strong enough to deal with the big threat in the area, having a couple of red herrings and stuff. So that right there would make a really just self-contained campaign. It'd be a lot shorter than the whole campaign I ran, but I mean the Dracul arc took about a year. So it could be a campaign unto itself. So I have all my notes. I have my thoughts around things here. I may go back in and potentially write up a little more formalized campaign setting for that. and then at some point, yeah, make a um, do a, run that as a campaign for another group somewhere down the road. Um, but again, it's something you may want to do. Um, you can also, based on your campaign, you could then, okay, here's my campaign. What happens next in the future? And start a new campaign based on the what happened in the events here. And this is what I know Nan's is doing it in the campaign that I'm playing at hers right now. Is it's taken place like well after her previous campaign. Um, and so it's a great way to go. You've already established a world, you've established some bad guys and some villains and some locations and places, and now you can grow and build on that. Even using some of those old characters and old people from the campaign as NPCs has helped to drive the story. The one caveat I'll make to that, and something I want to kind of is that if you are playing with people, um, it's a unique challenge here. But if you're playing with a really limited group here, you run into the problem of if you bring in a character from that campaign, the B team, kind of yes. Um, if you bring in a character from that campaign and make them an NPC in a new campaign, you might because you need to let your players know from the previous game that hey, your characters are now NPCs. I've determined what happens to them. This is where things are going. Now, obviously, if they're playing the game, you can't do that. But there's some things to keep in mind about that. Is that if you want to honor their characters' choices and how they wanted their characters to end up, um, there's some tricky things around that. But I mean, I would just encourage you to communicate if needed, or if they're okay with hey, do whatever you want, then fair game. Your those previous PCs are now NPCs in the world. Um, so obviously you can do that. You can also go back in time to a previous time to the campaign and run something in a previous era over what might happen. And this is I think I mentioned this before with my players, but I gave them a choice to run in three different eras. One was sort of a post-apocalypse, where after a big nasty world-ending apocalypse, and playing the age of survival. And then much later in the age of expansion, when kingdoms were forming and everything else was happening here, um, and then the age of progress, which is they chose the age of progress where there's airships and manatech items and lots of crazy stuff like that. The age of expansion of the expansion is directly related to the threat they were dealing with in the age of progress. The ultimate thing would be to take down the Dark King and be a part of that plot to destroy the Dark King, who was threatening to take over the world, take over all these different countries. He was the ultimate threat of that era. So, again, you can tease that kind of stuff in one campaign and go, "Hey, we're going to go back and deal with this in history." And you can play the characters that did this whole major thing here and had an effect on this major event that happened in this other campaign. So fun things like that, where you can do that, things like that, or just taking like a small sliver of what's happening in another part of the world while this campaign is going on, and where there's maybe some crossover potentially. Um, this is one thing. If you've watched Critical Role, this is what Matt Mercer's done pretty masterfully. Is all three of his campaigns were back to back to back, and it's been nuts. But their third campaign just ended, and I'm not going to give major spoilers, but I will say that it's really all three campaigns collided together. So the players were having to play all three of their characters from the three different campaigns um, at 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 once sometimes. And so craziness there. But again, that sort of world building that grows and grows on itself is something you can do if you reflect on your campaigns and keep those notes and keep that world alive. So absolutely think about how you can do things. Now, you can also just, hey, we're going somewhere else. We're going to a different world. We're going to a different campaign. We're going to a different setting and genre or whatever. Obviously, it's going to be fun. Some people want to mix it up each time. And so maybe taking a different system, maybe to entirely different genre. That's a great way to go too. It can kind of give you some fresh ideas, give you a chance to cleanse your palate and try something else a little bit. Um, but one thing to keep in mind is that you learn a lot from running a campaign. your style of narration, how you encourage players to role play, how you engage them in role play with your NPCs. Those are all skills you practice as a DM and get better and better over time, where you can draw them into a story and kind of inspire them to take an active role in what's going on. All of those skills you learn in one campaign will transfer over to other campaigns. So don't be afraid to look at how to go. How did I do that? What storylines worked? What types of encounters worked? Um, and using that in a future campaign. So uh, yeah, don't be afraid to try something new, and then come back to to a previous place. If you have all your campaign notes and settings, I know friend of the show and local one of our DMs we run with all the time here, Zach. He's run the same campaign 3 times, only once to full completion, but with different groups of people each time. Um, and so seeing how each team dealt with the scenarios there. Hey, these encounters didn't work. Let's rework them in the next time I run this. He did that. But then he's also has other settings we've gone back to a couple of times. And so having those notes, having that campaign you put together is not going to go to waste. You're going to find use for it later on. And I mean, and Dan's doing this too. Her World of Dragons is literally now 3 campaigns, 2 that were running concurrently, and then 1 in the past, and another one coming up, or potentially, no, you're doing another grim one, aren't you? Um, so again, take your setting, grow with it, um, and let it build, and try new things with it. Try different groups of people, try different parts of the world, try different time periods. Um, you've always got this giant sandbox to play in, and keep expanding. Um, so questions, for those of you who played in games, I'm not sure how many people we have in the chat right now, but it has there been a campaign ending that worked really, really well, or one that didn't work so well for you? Um, um, the tough ones for me have been campaigns that sort of ended abruptly, only because of life events. Um, okay, that'd be your first there. Wow. Okay. Um, Uh, so campaigns that end abruptly are tough. I mean, if they're planned to end abruptly and or end be a mini campaign or something like that, and that's understood by everybody, you can always have a chance to do that. But campaigns that start up and then stop all of a sudden there, and for various reasons, you're not gonna get that sort of epilogue, that sort of where do we all go? Um, I put the task to my players, 2 of you are here, uh, to tell me what you want for your characters in the next week after the campaign ends, the next month, and the next year. And we're gonna go through that and figure out like what it is they plan to do. And then obviously then beyond. I mean, it's just kind of see where things go here. But I want to give a chance to kind of have that moment of, okay, this ended. What do you do in the immediate future? What do you do next, a little ways down the road? And then what do you do a year from now? And so that way you get a chance to kind of get an epilogue, the immediate epilogue, then a little bit extended epilogue of like where things go. Because it's just it's more satisfying from a story standpoint to have a say in what happens ultimately. Obviously, I could be throwing things at them like next world-ending catastrophe. But no, they had their ending. They got their moment. They beat the bad guy. Now they get a chance to do something for themselves, settle down, start up a tavern. Who knows? Um, yes, you are the heroes, and you get the chance to you get to be the heroes. You'll be the people the party is famous in various parts of the world for having done great deeds and dealt with terrible threats to the whole world here. And obviously, if there were ever a time where they were needed again, they could step up again. But that'd be a story for another time. Um, I might use that line. We'll see. I've heard that line used in other places. But the idea that having that chance to do that is what really makes a campaign have an ending. And so sometimes you don't get that opportunity, and it's not that there's anything wrong with the DM or things just happen. And but when you get the opportunity as a DM to have that moment, even if it's a short campaign, even if it's having to end somewhat abruptly, if you can make an ending, think of your favorite TV show um, that had that was something got canceled. They never got a chance to finish out that storyline. They left on a cliffhanger and they're done. It's so frustrating. So, at the very least, having that one more episode or that made for TV that movie that just to resolve those dangling plot lines that it gets to resolve that whole piece there. Um, that's something you want to consider is if you could do that, I highly recommend giving that a chance there. Because then everyone goes out, yeah, it ended, but we got a chance to have an ending. Um, uh, so for Kim last to the end. I, you're gonna I missed uh um my part my plague ridden city group there. We had a blast there, but Pavea is over with, and we got our little epilogue and kind of decided what we are going to do with our characters and how we're going to be famous in the city and what we would do. Um, and it was a good time there. But yeah, it is an emotional time. It's an emotional moment where where things are ending, and getting that chance to have that epilogue is a really big deal. Um, uh, and it's usually for the players. But what's your favorite part? My favorite part is, I mean, for me as a DM, is seeing it come to completion, seeing that resolution, and seeing just um how important it was to the players when these big epic moments happen, how emotional it can be. And it is for me as well. When a character has to leave, or when something bad or good, frankly, happens, it's a good feeling to know that we built this story together and saw it through to completion or saw it to a resolution. That's my favorite part. Is I don't like leaving things unfinished. Um, Me with journals full of like partly started or various novels in forms of completion there. Where I went to very mostly short stories. And it's a lot easier to have an ending in a short story. Um, but yeah, having that resolution, having that shared experience of things things worked out in some way or other. That's definitely my favorite part. Um, uh, Let's see. So what else do we have here? Any other questions or any other things around this? Throw them up there as I kind of continue a little bit here on some things here. Um, when taking something from an old campaign, um, obviously, I mentioned before different ways you can do that, but the idea of taking a small event and turning it into a big one, or creating one shots for mini campaigns. There was a plot line in Avarice that kept coming up and the player kept dodging it or not engaging with it, and that's fine. But eventually in the game, I had to say, yeah, it got resolved by somebody else. There is a mini campaign or at least a one shot where somebody else went and dealt with something that the players didn't go and deal with. So that can turn into like a four shot, five shot, one shot, depending on how much you want to develop that whole piece there. Um, that can be something you can do down there. Yes, the pirate. And the funny thing is that encounter I already had built because my first time running Avrith, the party did deal with those pirates, and that was a plotline they actually went and dealt with. So I had all that ready to go. Literally, and you had heard about a couple of the bad guys. Eventually got to meet him in person finally. Good old Koresh. Um, so Koresh was taken by the party and brought to justice as he was a former member of the Gervon military. They brought him in before the king to be sentenced and imprisoned. So they eventually did get to meet him. but they never got a chance to fight him or deal with him. But somebody else did, and so that could be something we do when I'm bored and have some time and when want to run a little couple of sessions with a different group of people, different group of characters who went and did that. Um, Same thing can happen with an encounter that didn't happen, or I already used the haunted house setting that was actually the players did in the campaign off stream. It was one of the first few episodes they had, um, where they actually went and cleansed the haunted house. Well, I made a one shot out of that session, and there. Um, Question here: would leaving a plot hook at the end of the game be a good way of setting up a new camp for a new game? Absolutely. There's always going to be things that aren't fully resolved, or things that could pop up again. So having a plot hook that's out there, or something maybe the party forgot about that you just kind of like kept hidden, or didn't remind them about there, but all of a sudden somebody goes, "But what about?" And then again, that may be something, a tale for another time. So it could turn into a set of adventures with the same party, or it could be something that a new group of people goes and resolves because again, the party is they're settled down. They're jumping back out there again. So maybe a lower level group of people goes and deals with them instead, depending on what it is, and depending on what you want to do with that little plot hook. Um, there's I will say there's always in a game that runs as long as that, or even in some other smaller games, there's always a road not taken, a branch not followed, a plot line not explored, and those can always lead to more adventures. And as you can keep notes on those, and as you do your reflection on your campaign, look for those things. What didn't get resolved? What just got glossed over, or just got resolved in the background, maybe, and take note of those things because those could be seeds either for another campaign or another adventure or a one shot, um, whatever else you can come up with there. It's a great way of having things um, go there, or something that, I mean, you always have, I mean, all of your action movies and everything else have that thing, or of course your horror movies where everyone's all good, they're all fine, and then after the credits roll or just before the credits roll, like something like appears and slinks off, or the Big Trouble in Little China, where the monster reaches up and grabs from the back of the bumper of the truck there. And yes, there's still something to deal with. Again, all of those things could be little moments that turn into a new game, or maybe not. It all depends. It's a possibility, but if the storyline is resolved, that's what's satisfying there. And so having a plot line or a little thing like that there doesn't mean you have to start the whole thing over again and keep going. Um, but it could lead to something down the road. So obviously, yeah, that's something to keep in mind when you're doing your reflection is finding those things. Um, I've played in games where we didn't get those resolutions, where we didn't get a really satisfying conclusion. And um, it's one of those ones where you always feel like, well, maybe we'll come back to this at some point and keep going. But at least like a plot line should resolve. The idea is that yes, we could always do more. We hadn't taken over the region yet. We hadn't defeated the ultimate boss, but we defeated a boss. And so that can be where a campaign could end. At least if you can get that, there is a resolution. So as a DM, if you're planning for something like that, where he's like, "Hey, I'm not sure we're going to be able to keep going," at least have that confrontation, have that plot line, the plot line they're on, at least have that get resolved. That's the most important thing, because then you have an ending. Um, so that's something to keep in mind here as you're planning things as a DM. If for some reason the game is not going to run as long as you want it to, then give it an ending of some kind. And there's always the opportunity in the future to come back to it if you can, or start it up with a group, different groups. Somewhere down the road here, you've got this whole uh, slew of things that happened up to that point that can be sort of like fodder for your story with the new group. So something to watch out for there. Other questions, other things. In in planning a game, it's very hard to know your ending. Some people have they want to write a whole story and they know what the ending is going to be, but getting there can be difficult. And it's getting weaving that story, getting all the way to that ending there, and sometimes the ending's going to change. So when you're doing your campaign, have an idea where it's going, but don't be married to exactly how it's supposed to be done. Um, because I mean, dice rolls happen, life happens, things can get in the way of that ultimately coming to fruition. And so be flexible with your endings. For example, with Avarice, when I when I started planning my campaign, I didn't have an act two or three when I first started. I got an act two in my head about maybe 10 sessions in to the game. All of a sudden, oh, I know where this can go. And part of that, I wouldn't have thought of that if it wasn't for my party playing a dragonkin, um, with someone being there. Now I had that in the world as a thing when I did my world building. I had that as something that was out there, but I wasn't planning on making that part of the campaign until we had a dragonkin, in the party who potentially had ties to that area, potentially had a reason to go there and do something. So that's where you have a chance. Yes, it was mom. It was boyfriend. It was there were things that would bring that into uh, making it important to the story. Now, obviously, if nobody in the party had any ties to that place, it would have been a little bit trickier to go there if I wanted to do that. But I had other ideas as well. There was a whole plot line that involved going up and dealing with the elves of the north. There was a whole plot line with um, dealing with some very greedy dwarven merchants and merchant families and such. We did get into the giants arc a little bit, but the giants were I mean, could have played a much bigger portion, or the jungles to the south, to the southeast, the southwest of the continent could have played a big part. There's lots of things that could have happened. The party never made it to the far east coast of the continent. Nothing ever brought them all the way over there. So there's a whole part of the world they never went to. Um, so that's just it. If you're planning, if you're focused on driving them to a specific place for a specific thing, it can feel forced. But if you can find ways to tie it into the plot they're already following or the background of their characters, it's going to feel a lot more natural and be a lot easier to motivate them to go follow that plot line. And so in planning your campaigns, have an ending. You might develop an ending as you go, um, and so don't be afraid to change that to switch it up there. On Saturday, I'll talk a little bit more about the specific stuff in the campaign, about what how that ending came about and how it evolved a bit. I didn't have the whole thing. I didn't know what they were going to do exactly. There could have been various things that could have happened. So it really kind of was a the final confrontations, that plural confrontations, um, evolved over the weeks leading up to the actual last session. So we'll talk a little bit about that on Saturday. I think there with the party and let them in on the little behind the scenes bit there. But got a little bit here too. Um, yeah. Anything else there? Okay. Well, we're gonna wrap things up pretty soon here. Throw some. You want to keep things going here? Throw some comments and some questions in there. But again, really so much of our time as a DM is built in driving a plot, and getting that chance to have an ending is one of the best feelings. Um, as, as a pain, have, have the solution. use. Oh, I think I froze up for a second there. Think I'm back. Okay. To be good, good, excellent. So have that time uh, to have that resolution and work that with your players. It's going to help you develop a story to improve your storytelling because stories without an ending uh, aren't really aren't really satisfying for you, for them. Give them a chance to have an ending of some kind. I mean, wherever possible. So, and when you have that ending, when you've got that experience of having that whole campaign that comes to an ending, there, use that. Use that the skills you learned to take you into new campaigns, to new stories. And I hope that you all get a chance to do that. I know Nans is uh, getting there too. Those of you thinking about running your games in the future, those of you out there running, watching in the future now, when you have a chance to run, I hope that you get a chance to see that everything come to fruition and that storyline have the ending you'd like to have. So, with that, we're going to end today's show. I want to thank you for watching, both now and in the future. As always, if you have questions, things you want to add in the comments below, if you want to throw a message to me about a future topic you want to see covered, uh, please do so. We have all of our videos in the past there, all 47 of them now. This was 48, yeah. So 47 videos for this. Um, with all different topics about world building and everything else. And if you ever want to come back to some of those and just say, "Hey, I want to know more about this," make that comment as well. So hope you enjoyed. Um, hope you if you can join us on Saturday for the Q and questions and answers on Saturday, I'm gonna have the YouTube chat up as well, so that people if they are watching can throw questions at us as well. Um, and give everyone get a chance for all of our players and all the characters to have their epilogue moments. So thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being a part of something that's been a blast. So hopefully we'll have lots more in the future. Anyway, take care. We'll see you again soon and have great games. Bye.